Number 1.
I had recently gotten into some trouble at school. Me and a few of my closest pals decided to give a classmate a Texas chili bowl. After a phone call from the principal, my parents were furious. They decided after a long conversation together that it would be best if I spent summer vacation on my grandparents' farm learning responsibility. But really, it was just a cheap cover-up of punishment. Anyways, about a week into my stay, my grandparents informed me that my grandmother had a work party, and they wouldn't be home until the morning. They asked if I could tend to the chickens, cows, and numerous barn animals they had, and I eagerly accepted. Not because I'm a good grandson, but more so I could watch television in their room while they were gone. The next day, we said our goodbyes, and I watched them drive down the long dirt road. As soon as the dust in the air had settled, I rocketed to their bedroom and turned on the TV. Luckily, they had Netflix because there wasn't a cable reception here. I went ham. I watched stuff I don't even like, just because I could. After hours of binge watching, I fell asleep. I woke up not too long after because the chickens in the chicken coop were going crazy. I figured the dog got in there again and started running amok, so I put on my jacket and headed down the stairs. Now, the closer I got to the chicken coop, the more I realized that these chickens sounded extremely distraught. What the hell could that dog be doing? I turned my walk into a quick pace, and as I got right outside where the chickens were, I heard a noise that I only can describe as somebody fisting a jar of mayonnaise. I am going to kill that dog, I said to myself. I pushed open the door, and what I saw next, I will never forget. Old man Johnson from down the street was having sex with a chicken. That's right, he was going to town on one of my grandmother's poor chickens. A chicken we eat, I might mention. He didn't notice me, so in my most intimidating voice I said, "What the fuck are you doing to that chicken? Put him down and leave. And nobody has to know about this, friend." Old man Jensen gave me a look that sent shivers down my spine. After an intense but brief stare down, he said to me, "Do you like watching me fuck this chicken?" I shot him a disgusted look and said, "No, and you need to leave." Without warning, he began charging at me. Luckily for me, I ran track in high school. I jetted across the farm and right back into my grandparents' house. I slammed the door shut and went to the phone my grandmother left for me in case of emergency. I called the sheriff and told him there was somebody in the chicken coop fucking the chicken. Without realizing how silly that sounded, in an irritated voice, he replied, "Is this some kind of prank?" Before I could say no, the line went dead. Damn it, I thought. I went back into the other room to make sure I locked the door when it was opened. Swaying in the wind, like a piece of trash somebody left behind because they were too lazy to properly dispose of it. My eyes scanned across the dimly lit room, looking for any sign of intrusion, when I heard a noise. I turned around and realized it was coming from the patio. The closer I had crept towards the noise, the louder it grew, until I walked around the corner and saw the chicken fucker rocking back and forth in my grandfather's rocking chair. He was staring off into the distance, but he must have heard me breathing because he asked in such a calm and creepy voice, "Do you know why I fuck chickens?" I said, "I don't care why you fuck chickens, but I do care about getting you out of here. So you need to leave before I grab Lucille." My grandfather kept an old Louisville Slugger for coons, but I was ready to use it on this motherfucker, that's for sure. He wouldn't budge, so I said, "All right, buddy, I'm going to get Lucille." I turned around and went to the kitchen and grabbed Lucille and returned, but by the time I did all that, he was gone. He must have scurried off through the back. Sick bastard, I thought. There was a note left behind on the chair he was sitting in. It read this: "Chickens and humans can live as one, but not when prejudice stands in front of us, disparaging rude and judgmental remarks." To this day, I have no idea what the fuck that was supposed to mean. But all I know is, I hope I never meet that son of a bitch again. Or I might have to scramble his eggs. Number 2. It was the summer of 8th grade, leading into what would be my first year in high school. My girlfriend was going to stay with her family for the summer, so as young adolescents in love, we decided to grab a bite to eat, and then catch the new Captain America: Civil War. I was standing outside the cinema for what seemed like 47 or 48 minutes. My girl sure knew how to keep a nigga waiting, that's for sure. I reached for my cellular device and suddenly a chill crept over me. In the corner of my eye, I noticed a kid from school named Toshi. Toshi, standing a few feet away, was just staring at me while eating a strawberry or possibly sherbet triple scoop ice cream cone. I began to feel uncomfortable. Luckily, my girlfriend showed up not too long after. She gave me a hug and waved her mother off. We hurried into the cinema and away from Toshi. We bought our tickets, and surprisingly, I had a little extra spending money. "Hey, baby," I said, "would you like popcorn or perhaps a Coca-Cola?" She replied, "The fuck you mean, nigga? Of course. Hook that shit up." We waited in line to pay, and I again felt a presence. Somebody was staring at me. Across from the concession stand in another line, that motherfucker Toshi, looking all stupid and shit, with ice cream on his shirt and face, was just staring at me. I ignored him, thanked the cashier, and made my way to the theater. It was 15 minutes into the movie, and we realized nobody else was going to show up, so I got ballsy. I said in a hushed voice to my girlfriend, "Do you mind giving your boy a hand job to hold me over for the summer?" She agreed and got to work. It was getting hot and heavy when I heard a noise. It sounded like a dog licking the last drops of water out of his dish. My eyes instinctively cracked open when a few rows behind me, that foreign motherfucker Toshi was staring at me and my girlfriend. One hand in a bucket of popcorn and the other in his pants, jacking off. My girlfriend realized what was going on and screamed. A security guard quickly rushed in and subdued Toshi. He called for backup, and then him and another guard carried Toshi, pants around his ankles, outside the theater. The manager offered us a free movie and apologized. I said, "It's all good, player. That nigga Toshi is a trip. No skin off my bones." I never saw Toshi again after that, but I'd like to think he got the help he needed, or at least an ass whooping to set his bitch ass straight. One thing is for sure, though. I hope I never cross paths with Toshiyama Sato again. Number 3. It was Friday night. My parents had left for the weekend on a business trip. This was the first time they left me alone, so admittedly I was a tad bit nervous, but also I was excited. My buddy Skip Douglas was coming over, and we had a long night of video games, junk food, and R-rated horror films ahead of us. My parents left around 4, and Skip showed up not too long after. We immediately began to raise hell. Skip was a bad influence, as my mother would say, and he was. But he was also pretty cool. One time he told our principal to kiss his black ass, and he's white. Anyways, a few episodes into South Park, we grew bored. I half-heartedly suggested perhaps we make a prank phone call. Skip's face lit up like a neighborhood on Christmas. He said he was the king of prank phone calls. I said, "Great, let's give it a go then." I let him go first since he seemed pretty confident. We dialed a number and it rang a few times, and I said, "Skip, would you put it on speaker, please?" And he did. On the 5th ring, an old woman answered. "Hello, baby. Who this?" Skip, with a shit-eating grin on his face, said, "Is your refrigerator running, ma'am?" How original, I thought. The old woman sounded a little confused and said, I believe so, baby. What's this got to do with anything?" And then Skip proceeded to tell the woman he was going to come to her house, take a deuce in her blender, and make a shit smoothie, and force feed it to her. I gave Skip a look that without words said, "Dude, what the fuck?" He hung up and apologized. I said, "What was that about, Skip?" He said, "You've never heard that one." Before I could respond, the phone rang. Shit, we forgot to block our number, Skip. He told me to relax, and I answered. I tried to muster up a lie, but before I could, I was cut off. "Listen here, baby. I'm outside. Let me in," the woman said. The phone call ended. I said to Skip, "I think I just shit myself." He told me to relax and that they were just trying to spook us. And we calmed down when suddenly somebody started slamming their fist on the front door. I looked at Skip. He looked at me. And we knew we were in trouble. We sat there frozen with fear, trying to figure out what the hell we were gonna do. Skip said he was gonna make this right, and grabbed the phone. He dialed her number, and after a few rings, she answered. Before she could say anything, Skip apologized. He said that his evil twin must have gotten a hold of his phone while he was in the shower and pranked her. He assured it wouldn't happen again, and asked her if she could stop banging on the door because he had school in the morning. A long silence followed, and eventually the phone call ended. We never heard from that old woman again, but we sure did learn our lesson. Me and Skip remained friends for a few years after that, but eventually we drifted apart. I don't know what made me remember this story, but I had to tell someone. All I know is, I hope I never meet who was knocking on that door. Number 4. It was 3rd grade. This was a unique time in my schooling experience. I remember I was rapidly excelling and there was talk I was going to be sworn in as class president. In landslide fashion, I might add. My favorite part of 3rd grade, however, was my teacher, Miss McMullen. Miss McMullen provided us kids with the perfect balance of recess, learning, and snack time. It gave us something to look forward to throughout the day. Sadly, halfway through the school year, in comedic fashion, she slipped on a banana peel and fell down 3 flights of stairs. At the least, she was going to miss 2 weeks of school. During that time, we were given a substitute teacher. His name was Mr. Bonkel. The first day, he was late about 30 minutes. Us kids began to make jokes that perhaps it was because he was a poop head. Again, this was 3rd grade. Eventually, he arrived in a Batman t-shirt, and I immediately thought he was pretty awesome. He introduced himself and began to tell us why he was late. Apparently in the hallway he came across a remarkable piece of ass and just had to score them digits. During his rambling I noticed it was 10:45. That was our first snack time of the day. I lifted my desk and pulled out a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and began to eat it. Mr. Bonkel's face was stricken with rigor mortis. He quickly collected himself and calmly asked what I thought I was doing. I informed him that it was snack time, and my good buddy Carl said, "Oh yeah, snack time." He pulled out a chocolate chip cookie his mother packed for him. Mr. Bonkel didn't like that at all. He grabbed Carl by his shirt and lifted him from his seat. He proceeded to tell Carl he was a terrible person and disrespectful. He told him he was about to catch these hands if he ever pulled some shit like that again. Carl said he was sorry. Mr. Bonkel calmed down and he let go of Carl's shirt. He then asked the class if we could guess what his favorite cookie was. It was quiet, but eventually someone guessed. Snickerdoodle? Good guess, Mr. Bonkel said, but no. He then grabbed the cookie from Carl's desk and began to wipe his ass with it. He pulled out what was left, threw it at Carl, and with what was honestly genius comedic timing, said, "Chocolate strip." He then began to inform us that things were going to change. Snack time was no more, and if someone pulled a stunt like Carl again, he was going to take away recess. He told us after lunch we were going to begin college trigonometry, and until then we were going to work on science equations. It was at this time I began to think that Mr. Bonkel really was a poophead. School became miserable. Mr. Bonkel was out of control, strolling into class whenever he desired, reeking of whiskey and cheese curds. He would guilt-trip us into letting him borrow our lunch money to pay off his school loans. And he would lecture us on how Uncle Sam was five-finger fucking him good. Only one more week until Miss McCullen was set to return, but that was 1 week too long for Gordon Rigsby. Gordon was a sweet soul, but he was 40 pounds overweight and not having snack time was driving him crazy. Mr. Bonkel brought in Krispy Kreme donuts as promised. He was rewarding us for placing the highest test scores in Cherry Creek School's history. He asked Gordon if he would like the first donut. And Gordon, with $1 million smile on his face, said, "Oh boy." Gordon got up from his seat and walked over to Mr. Bonkel. He grabbed a chocolate-filled donut. He looked so happy. He was about to take a bite when, out of nowhere, Mr. Bonkel slapped it from his hand. He then told Gordon he was overweight and smelly, and said he wouldn't contribute a single calorie to his fat demise. He then provided Gordon with a 12-ounce portion of low-fat yogurt instead. The look on Gordon's face was that of a broken boy and somebody who was incredibly pissed off. He told Mr. Bonkel if he didn't get that yogurt bullshit out of his face, he was going to beat the dog piss out of him. The classroom was so lit. Everybody was cheering, but Mr. Bonkel wasn't having it. He said if we didn't settle down, we'd all have double detention, and he wasn't joking. His eyes then focused on Gordon. He said, "Listen, you tubby fuck. I hope you have room to eat those words. Flagpole, 3 o'clock. Mr. Bonkel straightened his tie and said, "Enjoy the donuts, children." He proceeded to sit down, staring at Gordon the entire time. Eventually, it was 2:55 and the school bell rang. Mr. Bonkel said class dismissed, and that he would see Gordon outside. We all headed to the flagpole, eagerly awaiting what was going to be the fight of the century. We waited for what felt like 15 to 20 minutes, when we realized he wasn't going to show up. Curious, we returned to the classroom looking for answers. We stumbled in on the janitor and he asked what we were still doing here. We explained that Mr. Bonkel was going to catch an ass-whooping at the hands of Gordon, and the janitor said that explains a lot. About 10 minutes ago, I came in here to begin cleaning, and Mr. Bonkel was in a rush, gathering all his personal belongings. He paid me $20 to help him load up his car, and then he drove off. We thanked the janitor for this information and left. Nobody knows where Mr. Bonkel ended up, but we do know why he left, and we were pretty sure he wouldn't be returning. Mr. Bonkel, let's not meet again, or I might have to call Gordon. Number 5. I was 15 at the time, and like most people that age, I was pretty foolish. Recently, I'd been watching videos about the deep web, and I became quite curious about the subject. My friend Freddie Gibbs talked about accessing the deep web before, so I decided to give him a call. "Hello?" Freddie said. I replied that it was me, Kevin, from U.S. History, and I was wondering if you wanted to come by and smoke some pot, and perhaps help me figure out the deep web. Freddie, after a brief pause, replied, "I suppose. I'll be there in 15 minutes." I hung up the phone and began to download everything I needed. Freddie arrived and we made sure that I set everything up correct, and we began what was the most disturbing evening of my life. It didn't take long to confirm all the terrible things I heard about the deep web. It truly was a fucked up place.
About an hour or so into our journey, we stumbled across a video of a woman. She was next to a plate of hot wings, and above the hot wings was a hand pouring hot sauce all over them. After about 30 seconds of pouring, the woman grabbed one of the wings, and instead of eating it like we expected, she began to rub it on her breast. Freddy, being the king of puns, looked at me and said, "Now that's hot." We high-fived and shared a good laugh when suddenly a chat box appeared on the screen.
"What's so funny?"
The chat box said. I looked at Freddy confused, and in the corner of my eye I realized the webcam was on. Not knowing what to do in a situation like that, I decided to tell him what I thought was so funny. I explained that the context of the woman rubbing hot wings on her breast, combined with Freddy saying "now that's hot," was a pretty good pun. The chat box then said typing.
You know what I find funny? I find Seinfeld funny. I find clowns funny. But I don't find art funny.
Freddy was not having this. He hopped on the keyboard and proceeded to tell this guy to suck a fat dick and kiss his ass. Freddy then clicked the X button on the chat and said problem solved. I stared at the computer screen in disbelief. Why was this guy leaving so easy? Freddy told me it was because he was a little bitch and he knew Freddy was a real ass nigga. I didn't believe that explanation at all. But we didn't hear from him again, so Freddy must have been right. Somebody fisting a jar of mayonnaise. I am going to kill that dog, I said to myself. I pushed open the door, and what I saw next, I will never forget. Old man Johnson from down the street was having sex with a chicken. That's right, he was going to town on one of my grandmother's poor chickens. A chicken we eat, I might mention. He didn't notice me, so in my emotion, I figured the dog got in there again and started running amok. So I put on my jacket and headed down the stairs. Now the closer I got to the chicken coop, the more I realized that these chickens sounded extremely distraught. What the hell could that dog be doing? I turned my walk into a quick pace, and as I got right outside where the chickens were, I heard a noise that I only can describe as some... But really, it was just a cheap cover-up of punishment. Anyways, about a week into my stay, my grandparents informed me that my grandmother had a work party, and they wouldn't be home until the morning. They asked if I could tend to the chickens, cows, and numerous barn animals they had, and I eagerly accepted. Not because I'm a good grandson, but more so I could watch television in their room while they were gone. The next... Number 1. I had recently gotten into some trouble at school. Me and a few of my closest pals decided to give a classmate a Texas chili bowl. After a phone call from the principal, my parents were furious. They decided after a long conversation together that it would be best if I spent summer vacation on my grandparents' farm, learning responsibility. Next day, we said our goodbyes, and I watched them drive down the long dirt road. As soon as the dust in the air had settled, I rocketed to their bedroom and turned on the TV. Luckily, they had Netflix because there wasn't a cable reception here. I went ham. I watched stuff I don't even like, just because I could. After hours of binge watching, I fell asleep. I woke up not too long after because the chickens in the chicken coop were going crazy.